General Hospital spoilers reveal that Tracy is seizing the new chaotic shifts in Port Charles like a seasoned predator, missing no detail, no matter how small. While others remain confused by the sudden changes in the underworld, as Sonny's closest allies begin to retreat, and as he himself shows increasingly obvious signs of mental and influential decline, Tracy has already begun building a covert web of control at a stunning pace. She isn't just listening in, she's orchestrating. Not just observing, but manipulating. Step by step. She's recalibrating the entire crumbling power system. And as Sonny loses his grip over the docks, this decline is no coincidence, it is part of a long-term plan. Tracy isn't merely aiming to eliminate him from the power board, but to seize everything he once ruled over, from transactions to the loyalty of those who once swore to live and die under his command. Sonny's quiet weakening has created a power vacuum in Port Charles like never before. And that void didn't remain empty for long. What makes it even more dangerous is that Tracy doesn't want to fill the void with just any new force. She wants to fill it with the very system of covert control she's been silently crafting. Every hidden story, every secret Sonny once kept locked in the dark, is now being carefully surfaced by Tracy, not to resolve them, but to use them as leverage. Old mistakes, unpaid debts, unresolved grudges, all are now Tracy's cards in the game. She doesn't need to raise her voice or issue threats. Tracy's real power lies in making others realize they're being drawn into a web from which there is no escape. And yet, amid all these calculated moves, even Tracy can't deny one truth. She is being consumed by the very obsession she thought she could control. The deeper she goes, the more influence she gains. The clearer it becomes that this game is not just about power, it's about survival in a collapsing order. One of the biggest shocks is that no matter how carefully Tracy calculates, she cannot control all the forces now emerging from the shadows. Those who once stayed silent under Sonny's dominance are now rising up, not just to challenge him, but to challenge anyone who dares claim the throne. What began as strategic adjustments by Tracy is spiraling into an uncontrollable frenzy. Even Tracy feels herself being suffocated by the very storm she started. What once were advantages are now becoming burdens. Once solid relationships begin to falter. Temporary allies start asking questions. And most terrifying of all, Tracy, who has always believed in total control, is beginning to doubt whether she controls anything at all. The madness now shaping the political landscape of Port Charles is no longer theoretical, it is real, growing like a malignant tumor, gripping everyone who once believed they stood above the chaos. Despite outward calm, Tracy is haunted by a series of unanswerable questions. Is Sonny's decline part of a larger trap she hasn't seen? Is her sense of control just a prolonged illusion before the real storm hits? And if that's true, does she still have time to retreat, or has she already gone too far to escape? Everything is moving beyond what Tracy had imagined. And as each new insanity piles on, each shock and every piece of truth exposed won't just change the game, it could fundamentally change her as a person, in ways no one could have foreseen. Tracy has finally agreed to sign the deal with Sidwell, a bold, risky, and completely irreversible move. This decision isn't just a business strategy or a strike at an old rival. It marks the beginning of one of the most significant realignments quietly unfolding in Port Charles, where every alliance, every moral line, and every sliver of trust is being pushed into dangerous confrontation. At the very moment she put pen to paper, Tracy placed herself at the heart of a storm where every move could ignite the next explosive outbreak, and this time, there's no safe exit. The Tracy-Sidwell partnership immediately triggered a cascade of chain reactions. Far beyond just deception's internal politics or surface-level economic interests. This decision is a signal to reset the game, realign power, authority, and, more crucially, the definition of the enemy. Tracy is no longer just a powerful woman in finance, she is becoming a strategic player in a citywide shadow war. And Sidwell, a manipulator willing to sacrifice any pawn to achieve his goal, only adds more danger to the equation. With the alliance formed, all eyes are now on Sonny, not as an untouchable power figure, but as a clear and present target for elimination. Both Tracy and Sidwell see Sonny as the biggest obstacle to remove. For Sidwell, Sonny blocks his plan to expand influence through the docks and strategic shipping routes. For Tracy, Sonny is a living symbol of a past she has never been able to bury: loss, humiliation, and enduring bitterness. The question is no longer about whether Sonny is right or wrong, it's that he is in the wrong place in the new world Tracy and Sidwell are building. One of the most elaborate schemes is now underway. From tightening control over Deception's rare supply chains, to secretly manipulating authorities to strip Sonny of the docks, everything is meticulously planned, systemic, and untraceable. And with each step, the true picture begins to emerge. This is no ordinary power play. It is a deliberate assault, masked by business contracts and financial deals, but at its core, it's a campaign of complete eradication. Sonny is no longer just an opponent, he is the official target that Tracy and Sidwell have marked, circled, and are slowly suffocating. The explosion is no longer hypothetical, it's happening. The atmosphere in Port Charles is thick with tension. Alliances are fracturing under pressure. And long-hidden secrets are beginning to leak like cracks that cannot be sealed. Those once loyal to Sonny are being forced to reconsider their positions, while outsiders can no longer afford neutrality. Sidwell is not the type to stop once a temporary goal is met. And Tracy, driven by her determination and belief that this time she will win big, is willing to go further than ever, erasing anyone who stands in her way, if necessary. In a world where every value is being rewritten, enemy is no longer defined by personal feud or specific events. For Tracy and Sidwell, Sonny is the last symbol of a worn-out order, a monument that must fall for a new world to rise. And once the storm fully hits, no one will be able to look away. Because this time, the goal is not just power, it's the complete erasure of Sonny's influence, both material and symbolic. And in this war, the true cruelty won't be in actions taken, but in the cold silence that accompanies the final decision. Sonny is no longer part of the picture they are redrawing from scratch. The latest shock in Port Charles has gone far beyond anyone's expectations, the disturbing truth that it was none other than Tracy and Sidwell who orchestrated the most dangerous and darkest series of events Sonny is currently facing. There is no more room for doubt. Every scheme, every twist related to his physical deterioration, mysterious bouts of dizziness, and moments when Sonny completely lost control of his mind, all stemmed from a single source, a carefully administered, cold-blooded poisoning carried out by the very woman few would have suspected, Tracy. Tracy wasn't just a passive observer or a distant mastermind. She was the direct coordinator of the entire plan. Navigating between two worlds, the respectable Quartermain legacy and the shadows of a clandestine alliance with Sidwell. Outwardly maintaining her aristocratic composure, Tracy quietly handed the toxin to Sidwell's men, executing a strategy to gradually weaken Sonny, slowly, subtly, and thoroughly, just enough to prevent him from suspecting anyone or finding any clear trace. This wasn't just about personal revenge. It was a radical reset, a calculated disruption of the power dynamics in Port Charles, a dismantling of the once untouchable image of Sonny that loomed over the town. But the story doesn't end there. What's even more terrifying is that this is only the beginning. Tracy and Sidwell have no intention of stopping now. On the contrary, Sonny's incremental collapse has fueled them to go further, become more ruthless, and execute deeper manipulations, not just to undermine his physical state, but to seize control over his reputation, underground dealings, and the minds of those closest to him. Once Tracy stepped into the role of the puppet master, there was no turning back. She became consumed by a new obsession, the obsession with total control. The need to erase Sonny's influence entirely and replace it with a system she and Sidwell could govern as monopolistic overlords. Sidwell, in turn, capitalized on every shift in power to secure financial and political gain, pushing Tracy deeper into darkness. Together, they became a toxic power couple, an alliance so lethal that opposing them could cost someone their life. The evil here isn't in gunshots or spilled blood, it's in the silent, precise, traceless execution of their plan. Seemingly innocent encounters, harmless advice, unassuming bottles of wine, everything may have been calculated. Sonny doesn't realize he's being manipulated. Both physically and mentally. And the most horrifying part? He's slowly losing his ability to discern friend from foe. Every step he takes might already be part of a meticulously designed labyrinth, one where every path leads to his destruction. Tracy's obsession has mutated beyond old-fashioned revenge. It's now an addiction to power, a need to erase everything Sonny represents just to feel in control of the entire game. While Sidwell continues operating with underground networks, sourcing materials, and collaborating with dark forces outside Port Charles, Tracy is quietly capturing the remaining fragments of Sonny's once loyal allies, turning them into pawns in a chess game no one else dared to play. Port Charles has no idea it is changing from within, not due to a public coup, but because of two people pulling strings from the shadows. The story of Sonny being controlled is no longer a theory, it's a bitter reality unfolding hour by hour. And the most frightening truth? This adjustment has no end. Because when power becomes an obsession, the one who wields it never knows what enough means. Will anyone realize the truth before it's too late? Or will Sonny, once a symbol of resilience, fall without ever knowing that the fatal blow didn't come from an old enemy, but from someone he once considered an enduring part of Port Charles? Tracy is now crossing boundaries she once swore never to breach. In this silent, brutal war to destroy Sonny, she has chosen a new pawn, Drew. Not to save, but to use. As a strategic tool in the long-laid plan crafted by her and Sidwell. Drew, who has been entangled in moral dilemmas and personal conflicts with both Jason and Sonny, is no longer seen as an ally or threat, but the perfect piece, a key link to execute new moves without exposing Tracy's hand. Her cruelty isn't in directly attacking Drew, but in turning him into someone who thinks he's in control, while every decision he makes is actually pre-written in her script. One of the biggest shocks in Port Charles is slowly surfacing, not because of an assassination or a public shootout, but because the truth is leaking, that every recent upheaval around Sonny, from minor losses to major health crises, traces back to people he thought no longer cared. Tracy, with her emotionless face and disturbingly calm exterior, is pushing everything further than anyone ever imagined. And in that plan, Drew, with his fractured past, vulnerable psyche, and unhealed wounds, becomes the ideal weak point to be manipulated. Dragged into a war he doesn't even realize he's a pawn in. Tracy's latest move isn't just about overthrowing Sonny anymore. She wants to completely erase him, eliminate his presence from Port Charles's power map. She doesn't want him weakened, she wants him incapacitated, beyond recovery. This is total destruction. Body, mind, reputation, and every human connection anchoring him to life. By using Drew to carry out the dirtiest parts of the job, Tracy ensures that no trace leads back to her. In the whirlwind, Drew may believe he's reclaiming honor or fighting for justice, while in truth, he's merely enacting invisible orders. Madness is piling up, logic is distorted. And the boundaries between right and wrong, truth and deception, are now dangerously blurred. It proves one thing. Tracy isn't just waging a power struggle, she's rewriting the game's rules in her own way, with steady hands, a cold heart, and a mind unshaken by remorse. When every move has been placed, the only thing missing is the final act. And that act, as Tracy envisions, is the utter downfall of Sonny, once the final pillar of an aging world. With Drew as the instrument, Sidwell as the financier and enabler, Tracy is on the brink of an unprecedented triumph. And unless something disrupts the plan, this time, she won't just win, she'll create a new order. An era where everyone who once opposed her has been cleared away. Sonny won't just be defeated, he will be erased. And in that moment, Tracy will emerge from the shadows, not as a wounded woman, but as the ultimate victor. A mad, unethical plan, carried out with near-perfect precision, and if all goes as scripted, the power history of Port Charles will turn a new page, written in blood. Betrayal, and the name Tracy, the woman who wouldn't hesitate to use anyone, even Drew, to achieve what she sees as the new order. Tracy had always believed she was the one in control, the mastermind who could manipulate everything with sharpness, power, and ruthlessness that no one dared to challenge. But in the very moment she thought she had full command, over Sidwell, over Drew, over the docks and even deception, the game board began to shift violently and unexpectedly. Tracy is about to pay a steep price for everything she's done, and the first cost is the loss of control over deception, not just a financial asset, but a symbol of her influence in Port Charles's business and social elite. The blow came swift and more devastating than any counterattack Tracy had ever faced. Sonny, once poisoned, defamed, and dismantled by her cruelest tactics, did not fall as she predicted. Instead, he quietly rose, aligning with his closest allies, Michael, Carly, Ava, and even Dex, to craft a revenge plan that was silent yet devastatingly effective. They didn't need to strike Tracy with violence, because they knew her greatest weakness wasn't physical, it was her pride and reputation. And so it was deception, the very company she once weaponized to bring Sonny down. That became the first thing ripped from her grasp, a blow straight to the heart of her power. Through a series of covert transactions, leaked documents, and strategically orchestrated financial investigations, Sonny's team caused investors to flee deception. They spread word of illegal collusion between Tracy and Sidwell, of money laundering schemes, and of smuggled materials brought in through Sidwell-controlled routes. In the eyes of the public and regulators, Tracy was no longer seen as a ruthless but cunning leader, but as a dangerous manipulator who had to be removed from the industry. Meanwhile, Ned and Brooke Lynn, who believed they were on the sidelines or at least not deeply involved, started to realize they were sinking into the very pit Tracy had dug. Ned, as a businessman and a quartermain, found himself under investigation for shady contracts he didn't even know he'd signed. Brooke Lynn, who once trusted that her grandmother was simply protecting the family, now faced the collapse of her career and credibility in the entertainment world due to deception's downfall. She was dragged into crisis press conferences, capital withdrawal announcements, and public backlash from furious shareholders. The more they tried to fix things, the more they realized this storm couldn't be stopped by apologies or strategic meetings. They were paying the price for seeds Tracy had sown. And the cruelest part was, they had no idea they were just victims of a scheme they never agreed to. The Quartermain family began to fracture. Dinners once filled with conflict turned to chilling silence. Ned's gaze toward his mother no longer held blame, only silent disappointment. Brooke Lynn no longer ran to Tracy for advice, but began to question everything her grandmother ever taught her, that control equals survival, and that winning at all costs is the only way to endure. And then, Tracy began to face the harshest truth. She wasn't just losing deception, or being outmaneuvered by Sonny, she was destroying her own family, the one thing she once swore to protect. Every tactic, every alliance, every strategy she thought was brilliant had become a weapon turned against her, stabbing her in the back with each passing day. Her collapse didn't come with a grand explosion, but through quiet, relentless fractures, crumbling piece by piece until nothing could be saved. In the end, Tracy stood alone amidst the ruins she had built herself. No more power. No more loyalty. No more prestige. Only the raw truth, that she had gambled everything on a dangerous game, and lost completely. And the most bitter part? It wasn't losing to Sonny, it was dragging her own family into the abyss just to satisfy an unyielding pride. While Sonny emerged from the shadows as a survivor, Tracy, who once held everything in the palm of her hand, was left with a shattered legacy and a painful lesson. When power is built on betrayal, the price is always paid by those closest to you. Even after losing deception, even as Ned and Brooke Lynn slowly turned away because of her betrayal disguised as strategy, Tracy did not stop. On the contrary, defeat only fueled in her a fiercer, more obsessive, and more dangerous hunger than anything in her past. With nothing left to lose, she began to act with the cold recklessness of someone who had crossed every moral line and now lived only for one goal, to reclaim her power, at any cost. And from that moment, a new disaster began to form within Port Charles, a storm not of violence, but of twisted calculation born from obsession. The story was no longer about pure power. but about a warped reprogramming of Tracy's mind, where failure wasn't the end, it was the fuel for even bolder, more unhinged ambitions. She no longer believed in slow reconstruction or behind-the-scenes deals. Now, every move she made was absolute, total domination or total destruction. Those who thought Tracy had been defeated would soon face a more terrifying truth. She hadn't fallen. She had just started playing at a more brutal level. Each day, the obsession in Tracy's mind grew, over Sonny's betrayal, the humiliation of losing deception, the disappointment in Ned's eyes, and the painful silence of Brooklyn. These memories became the engine behind a new wave of plans, not to make amends, but to reshape the order of things her own way, no matter the cost. And with that, new shocks began to emerge. Companies manipulated, sources bribed, intermediaries vanishing without a trace, and former opponents quietly backing away. The farther she went, the less Tracy could stop. She was now ensnared in the very web she had spun, a world where there was no room for mercy, where family was just a tool, and where everyone was a pawn ready to be sacrificed. The most disturbing part? Tracy knew she had strayed beyond morality, and didn't care. She believed that absolute power was the only salvation for the losses she'd suffered. She no longer sought forgiveness, only vengeance, the need to make those who hurt her feel her pain. And while Port Charles was still licking its wounds from the last power war, Tracy was already preparing the next strike, a blow where no one would be safe, and where no side could claim moral righteousness. A new disaster was coming, not through gunfire, but through the deeply distorted psyche of a woman who had lost everything, and was now ready to destroy everything. When her final, unhinged adjustments are unleashed, Port Charles will never be the same again, because the woman who was once part of the family, has now become its silent nightmare, and no one will be able to stop her.